means don't worry. You can break this cycle through your gross action. Means not indulging in gross action is a point where we have the power to enter that cycle and break that cycle. Not in the imagination of subtle, not in the mental.
So, the soul, now fully gross conscious of the first most human gross form and still unconscious of the subtle and mental, experiences in the gross world the impressions of the last most animal gross form dissociated or dropped.
So it's more or less of a repetition which we did yesterday, that the most first human form is nothing but the consolidated of the most last animal form dropped, consolidated mold. Yeah, of the last form dropped. So now the first human form, what it has gathered in order to experience are the samskaras of the last animal form. And once those impressions are exhausted, spent, utilized, experienced, the most first human form is dropped. But that does not mean that samskaras are all over, no. Because in the most first human form, the human being started accumulating fresh samskaras. So those are there, and they will become the platform or the basis of the most next human form. And that is how it will go on and on.
When all the impressions of the last most animal gross form are exhausted, it is but natural that the first most human gross form is dissociated from the soul.
We call that death. Yeah, simple.
This experience of the soul is universally termed the death of the human being.
So again, to understand why people die and how people die, I'm just digressing. People cry when somebody dies and all that, but the fact of the matter is, the crying is because of our selfishness, because of our selfish association with that physical form, you see. And irrespective of what could be the cause of death, we may say high blood pressure, cancer, whatever, diabetes, whatever. You know, the most fundamental factor is that all those samskaras which that particular form had brought from the astral world, the semi-subtle world, to be exhausted and experienced, are now experienced. So there is no further need for that particular body or form, because it has nothing to do. Now it is unemployed because all the samskaras are experienced. So what does the body do? It just drops. And then it takes a next form in order to do away with all the samskaras which it has gathered in this particular form.
As explained previously, although the soul is dissociated from the first most human gross form, it is never dissociated from its subtle or its mental forms or bodies.
Again, a repetition that what goes off is only, in a sense, 1/3 of your body, which is the gross body. The soul never loses its connection with the subtle and the mental bodies, right from the stage of the initial urge till realization, I am God state. So in other words, that association and dissociation of the consciousness of the soul is only with the gross form and never with the subtle and the mental form, that continues its journey further forward in the astral world, also known as the semi-subtle world, not the subtle world, and experiences an acute mental state of what we call as hell or heaven. It is not a locale as we did yesterday. It's not you cannot GPS and Google search where is this heaven or where is this hell. It is a mental state. You experience joy or you experience suffering depending upon the prepondering samskaras, which means which are the heavier samskaras. And then once they are almost coming to a balance, you take another form.
It was also previously explained that though the soul is dissociated from its first most human gross form, the soul retains and experiences through the subtle and mental bodies the impressions of the dropped or dissociated first most human form, and the soul again associates itself with the next most human form to experience the impressions of the previous human form dropped.
I think that I have already covered. Whatever I have gathered in this life, if I am not destined to achieve moksha, then I have to take another birth and I will have to experience in the next birth. And this keeps on happening. And that is the reason why Baba says desire for desirelessness, hope to rise above all hopes. Want nothing and you will have everything. Why? Because desires are there. They are so potent, they are so powerful that it tends the consciousness of the soul to take form again and again and again.
In fact, the next most human form is nothing but the consolidated mold of the past impressions retained of the previous body or form that dissociated from the soul. Thus, the association of the soul with the next most human form is called universally the birth of a human being. The apparent gap between the death and the birth of a human being is that period in which the gross conscious soul, in its association with its fully developed subtle and mental bodies, has experiences of the predominant counterpart of the opposite impressions gathered by the recently dissociated human form.
Now, somebody may ask, because that is what has been asked, how long does the soul remain in the state of heaven or hell? The answer, there cannot be any answer. It's asking when the baby is born, how long will this baby live? How long will it live? Depends on the impressions, the total amount of impressions that the baby has brought along with it in order to experience in that particular birth. And once those impressions are exhausted, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 years, whatever that may be, the body drops. In my understanding, I have not read it anywhere, but in my understanding, in the same way, depends on how much of accumulation we have done of the impressions in this form. You see, that will determine the time to be spent in the so-called heaven or hell state. If I have, let's say, accumulated a lot of bad karmas, that means I have to suffer in the mental state of health for a comparatively long period of time. And Baba has also said that time is a construct of the mind. There is no such thing as time. So in other words, the time at various levels of our consciousness, they are quite different. We must have seen that when we are dreaming, we see a long dream. Somebody is born and then got married and had children and went to school and college and all that long thing. But if a machine is kept in our, there are scientific machine, it will say that you only dreamt for a few minutes. But in those few minutes, I have done so many things. So time at various levels of awareness is quite different. Time on earth is quite different from time in the subtle world, in the mental world. And in the truth or reality, there is no time. Baba says nothing has ever happened and nothing is ever going to happen. There is only the present, eternal now, which encompasses all of the illusory past and all of the anticipated future. There's only one moment. Now we can't understand this because we are trying to analyze with the mind that which is beyond the mind. And that's why Baba says, in order to know that which is beyond the mind, in order to know through the mind that which is beyond the mind has to go. And mind go means manonash. Manonash is basically realization. Once we realize, then automatically there are no questions to ask. You yourself are the question and the answer, both rolled up into one in that sense.
This state of the soul in the apparent gap between death and birth is generally called hell or heaven, and this process of intermittent association and dissociation of consciousness of the conscious soul in human form, now fully conscious, is termed the reincarnation process.
Again, yesterday we did reincarnation process. Yesterday we did that in reality, in truth, there is only one real birth and one real death. There is no truth between these two. What people, what Vedantists and other thoughts say, talk about reincarnation process is an illusory aspect of dropping and taking on just the gross physical body. We have done what is one real death, what is one real birth and one real death. But a beautiful explanation has been given by Baba in the supplement. We'll do this when we come to that.
If the predominant counterpart of the impressions of opposites, such as virtue and vice, good and evil, male and female, etc., as experienced by the soul, now associated only with the subtle and mental, is of virtue or goodness, that is, the positive aspect of the opposite impressions, then the soul is said to be in heaven. If it is of vice or evil, that is, the negative aspect of opposite impressions, then the soul is said to be in hell.
So, the predominant opposite impression, yesterday we did that. This is, let us say, so-called negative impressions, so-called positive impressions. Then the predominant, if you say a weighing scale, then the predominant, the heavier impressions are the good impression, the virtuous impression, and therefore we will experience, that person will experience a state of heaven. Opposite, then it will be the state of hell. And as the person is experiencing and enjoying the beauty of heaven, whatever it is, as it is experiencing, it is also utilizing those impressions. And as the impressions are being utilized, the pen of that scale becomes lighter and lighter and lighter and lighter. And the moment it is about to balance, it won't balance. About to balance, it takes another form. Sometimes we are so engrossed in the enjoyment that the pen topples. Okay. It goes like this. So now which are the predominant impressions? The so-called negative impression. So based on these impressions, samskarically, it will take birth in that form, in that culture, in that country, in that family, where the possibility of utilizing these negative samskaras are optimum or best. So people start treating you badly, people start blaming you, you are born in a very not so good situation. Why? Because you enjoyed it too much. Now let us suffer a little bit. So this is how the whole thing functions all the time on earth as well as in the state of heaven or hell.
The states of heaven and hell are nothing but states of intensive experiences of the consciousness of the soul, experiencing either of the predominant counterparts of the opposite impressions, while the soul is dissociated from the gross body or gross human body or form.
So from this literature, what we get to know, in the state of heaven or hell, you only experience one type of experience which is predominant, either heaven or hell. Initially, we were given to understand in our school days and what we call a dharma gyan, knowledge of the religion and all that, that okay, you will be experiencing this then, and then you have to experience that. So it is a one-way traffic. Either you experience heaven or you experience hell. The another good thing in that is that you do not create fresh samskaras or impressions in the state of heaven or hell. That's another positive thing, that it is only one way. You are only spending, you are utilizing. And in my reading of Baba's literature, the same thing happens when you are dreaming. When you are dreaming, you simply exhaust your samskaras. That's why I sleep a lot, so that I dream, and exhaust my samskaras in the dream rather than experiencing it in the gross world. Yes, Naman has a question.
So, by this
Actually not sleep lot, but dream lot. Yeah, because if you go in the sound sleep state, which is deep sleep state, then actually you are one with God in the Paratpar Par Brahma state. That is the beyond state of God. In Sufi term, it's called Vara ul Vara state. So if you are in sound sleep state, it is not a dream state. You know, it is you exist. You are there, obviously, but you do not know that you are there. You are not. But in sleep, in dream state, you know you are there.
So in scientific term, there is a term known as rapid eye movement.
Rapid eye.
REM.
Yes.
So in REM, we are dreaming.
Dream.
Yes.
When we are not, so there are 90 minutes of cycles.
Yes.
So 30 minutes of dream,
Correct.
30 minutes of deep sleep.
Yes.
So when we say deep sleep, you are one.
In deep sleep or sound sleep, where there is no
Yes, yes,
dream,
you
there's
are-
no REM, there's no dream, there's no hypnosis, there's no nothing. You exist, but you do not know that you exist.
You're one with God.
That you are one with God in the Paratpar Par Brahma state.
Conscious of yourself.
You are not conscious of yourself. And that is the exact state of God in state one. In when we do the charts, we'll come to that. State one of God, which is known as the beyond state of God. Paratpar Par Brahma state. So actually you are that. You are there. It's not as if something like akin to, no, you are. You can never, ever, one more ever, be separated from God. It's not possible. It's everything is in God. It's only various.
This proves that you are God. You are already.
Correct.
Yes. But experientially, I'm
Yeah, Baba had said that. I don't know if it was it with Elizabeth Patterson or I don't remember whom. So, but like for example, what is Elizabeth? We all know Elizabeth. Elizabeth is God. You and I and everybody and everyone and everything is everyone and everything at the same time and for all time. That means only one. It's only one. But the point is, Elizabeth is what? Elizabeth is God plus samskaras, impressions, is equal to Elizabeth. God plus samskaras is equal to Elizabeth. Now, we've ordered for Elizabeth to be God, to become God, whatever word you want to use, She has nothing to do. She has not to. Spirituality is not an accumulation or a gathering from without. Without means from outside. It is an unfoldment from within. And as it unfolds, all that is not necessary, garbage, kachra we call it, weeds out. So in other words, for Elizabeth to experience herself as God, which she is, but she can't experience herself as God because of the accumulated impressions. The moment impressions go, Elizabeth equal to God. You see? So Baba says that when we talk about God realization, Baba says God realization is nothing but the conscious knowledge and experience that you are God. Because you always have been God. There can be nothing but God. There is nothing but God. You are only God. Only thing is we don't experience it because our consciousness is shrouded, covered, enveloped by karmas, impressions, samskaras. And the reincarnation, yesterday we did that, the reincarnation process, I use that word thappar, thrashing, that. The reincarnation process is only there in order to wean away from all the unnecessary garbage which it is there. It is something like, let's say a sculptor, we all know this, a sculptor, he brings a big piece of marble and he creates, let us say, Baba's image in that. Now, has he brought something from outside to create? No. The image was already inside the marble. All that he did was he removed, chip, the unwanted part, and the image was there. So in the same way, the image of God or the actuality, the truth of God is in each and every one and being each and everything. What is required is to chip off the unwanted parts. That is our, for that we are reincarnating over and over again. But the unfortunate part, it will come here, instead of reducing the balance of garbage, we are increasing the balance of garbage by not realizing what are we here for, what am I doing here, why have I come here. So we run after things which are actually not important from the spiritual standpoint and we gather more and more garbage. But that's a game which we all are playing. Yes. Sorry, deep
Yes.
sleep. Yes,
You're one with God.
yes. Better in the sense, yeah. Rakesh is asking is, I'm speaking on for people to. Rakesh is asking whether deep sleep is better than the dream state. Better in the sense you feel invigorated, you feel freshen up. When you get up in the morning, you feel, aha, that, that is, in that sense it is better because you are one with God. Many of our problems, many of the, we are not able to get some solutions to certain things and you pray to Baba and Baba, you take over, you please take charge, you help me with this and go into a deep sleep. The next morning you get the answer. It's because you became one with Baba in that state and He is given you the answer. This is my way of looking at it. In dream state, it is better in the sense because you are exhausting samskaras and not accumulating fresh samskaras. You cannot get God realization either in deep sleep state or in dream. Why I tell you? Because God realization is a conscious event. You have to be conscious in the human form and not sleeping or not dreaming that way. At least to that extent, the load is getting reduced, no? Yeah, that way, yes. Yeah, I did not hear that. Yes, you are right. So Rakesh says you get God realization faster by dreaming too much. Yes. For that, you have to sleep too much also. Yeah. I practice
But your
that.
karma will not allow you to sleep all the time. It will goad you. Your karma. It will not allow you to sleep. It will wake you up. You'll wake
Sorry.
sleeping without pills.
Now, there's a
Without pills.
question here. 1 minute. A very good question. Somebody asked a similar question about becoming unconscious. Let's say you are knocked off and you become unconscious, or you are in a hospital and you have been injected with sleeping, whatever. Does it mean the same thing that you are one with God in the beyond state? And Baba said yes. Irrespective of in whatever be the method of your
Unconsciousness.
unconsciousness, once you are not conscious, after becoming a human being, which is fully conscious human being in terms of fully grown, gross, subtle and mental bodies, and then when you go become unconscious by whatever means, my understanding is yet you go. There's nowhere else to go. Where do you go? When you are unconscious, where do you go? There's no place where you can go except in the beyond state of God, which is the Paratpar Parbrahma state. So yes, since you ask, sleeping pills also,
She
yes.
just said sleeping pills. You will sleep without sleeping pills.
Sorry?
If you should be sleeping without sleeping pills.
No, that is there. What she asked was whether if you take a sleeping pill and then you become unconscious, would it be the same thing?
No, you understood it right. No.
Okay, anyway. तो माइक में बोलो ना. Right. Correct, you do go. Beyond the beyond state. I don't want you to go beyond the beyond state because then you'll have to come back again in the human form. But when we say beyond the beyond state, it is that state one in God realization where Baba talks about the beyond state of God. So now, otherwise everybody will go in the beyond state. So let's continue with the reading.
Good. But there you won't know that he's speaking. Here we're doing God speaks.
Chalo.
The soul itself does not go to heaven or hell as it is the general belief because it is eternally infinite and eternally in the oversoul.
Soul does not go anywhere. Yesterday somebody asked me for a similar question. Nothing ever happens to the soul. Soul is untouched, unscathed, in a sense unaffected. Whatever that is happening to the consciousness of the soul. Remember that. The oft repeated example that I give is there's a full moon up in the sky, in the heaven. You call it heaven, but in the sky. And there's a reflection of that full moon in a water body. Let us say a tumbler, a pail, or whatever. and then there's another water body, then there's a third water body. The first illusion that you get is that there are so many moons, isn't it? Oh, there's a moon here, because there are different water bodies. Number one. Now you shake a little water, and the moon will shake. So the another impression, which is Brahm, which is illusion, is that the moon is shaking. Nothing is happening to the moon. All that is happening is in the domain of illusion, as we say, in here. In the same way, nothing ever happens to the soul. What is happening is only happening to the consciousness of the soul. And because unfortunately, I would not say unfortunately, that's the scheme of things. We have the real I, that is the self, has associated itself with the false I, which is the body, mind, emotions, desires, whatever, and thinks that that is the real I. So whatever is happening to my body, I think it is happening to me. Am I making sense? And then I get agitated, irritated, sometimes irrigated, like that. It is something like I am standing and there's a sunlight and there's a shadow. My shadow is there. Now somebody is jumping on my shadow. Is it really hurting me? No. Because I know it's my shadow. You see? But then there are people who, how dare you walk on my shadow? Or how dare you spit on my shadow? Because if I identify myself with the shadow, then I feel hurt. Am I making sense? So in the same way, nothing ever happens to the soul. Everything that is happening in the domain of illusion to the consciousness of the soul. Once we are able to distinguish between these two things, that it's happening to my body. And that's why Baba says, that the way to start, there was a beautiful prayer which Baba had given to the Mandali, and the Mandali were asked to repeat that prayer with all their hearts for a certain duration of time. Baba gives something and says, okay, now no more. It goes like this: I am not the body. I am not the mind. I am not this. I am not that. I am nothing but a living lie of that truth. That is me. And unless the lie is dead, the truth cannot be. So what is important is that we have to kill the lie that I am this body. And the way to do it, Baba used to say, you can say, and there are many seers who say, if they are unwell, oh, my body is feeling unwell, or my hand is hurt. I am not hurt. My hand is hurt. My leg is paining. So that way we try to distinguish between the real I and the false I. And even in our languaging, when we use such words, then that happens. Many times, this is my practice digressing, I can't help it. We say we feel hurt. Somebody said a very bad word, we call it a swear word, to me. Da 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 da, Cyrus. I say I am hurt. Now what is hurt? I am not hurt. It is my ego that is hurt. If we understand that, and Baba is here to really smash our false ego. When I say ego, I mean the ego mind or the false ego. Because in the very, very, very first lecture, we said that ego is the real thing. Ego cannot be annihilated. Ego can only be transformed from the false ego. First session. If you are following the trail, if not following, then contact the master here, Rakesh. He will give you a playlist. You call it a playlist of all the. Where we said, because somebody asked the question about ego, I said, ego is not wrong, ego is not false, ego is not bad. Ego is the real thing. The false ego, the ego mind is wrong. So what I'm trying to say, as Buddha, Lord Buddha, the learned Lord Buddha said, if you are suffering, you are to be blamed. Full point. So simple. If I am going through anything, I cannot blame anybody for what I am going through. I must take the blame. I must own up the blame and try to find out why am I hurting. And the answer, if we really are sincere, it would be, it is my ego. It is as simple as that. And growth begins where blame ends. The moment we stop blaming others for what we are going through, we take the charge of our own joy, happiness, pleasure, whatever you call it, in our own hands, and we start growing. The moment we say, unless and until my wife changes her behavior, I will not be happy. Can I change anybody else's behavior? No. Because the change will only come from within. The key of changing is from within. It cannot be that I say, oh, now she is sleeping. She's not bothering me at all. Otherwise, she will start bothering me once the session is over. What I'm trying to convey is I can only take the liberty with her and not with anybody else because she's very understanding. For most parts, she doesn't understand, so it's... What I'm trying to say is that the door to the change can only be opened from within. You cannot enforce change on somebody else. And in the same way, if we want to change, we have to take the reins of change in our hand and stop blaming others. Because growth begins where blame ends. Simple as that. Go ahead.
It is the consciousness of the soul which experiences the impressions.
So the soul doesn't go here, there, everywhere. It is the consciousness which is experiencing.
As soon as the predominant counterpart of impressions is experienced and exhausted, and just when equilibrium is about to be maintained between the opposites of impressions of the last human form that was dropped, at this juncture, the soul automatically associates with the next most human form, molded of the consolidated impressions of opposites which were about to be in a state of equilibrium.
We've already done that. About to be in a state of equilibrium, you take birth. And once before, I tend to be very repetitive, that's my practice. Many of us blame that, oh, I have been born in a certain, we call it nakshatra, in a certain zodiac sign, as a result of which I am suffering. And jocularly I would say, and I keep repeating the same joke, so please laugh. So the child would blame the mother, had you held on to me for another 15, 20, half an hour, and then push, doctor said push, and then I would have been born in a different zodiac, and then I would have been happy ever after. Why did you not do that? That is all humbug. In a sense, it is not that you are going through what you are going through because you are born in a certain zodiac sign, but you chose to be born in that zodiac sign. Chose means you don't consciously choose. The samskaras automatically allay itself, in a sense, match itself in such a way that you chose to be born in a certain zodiac so that you have the opportunity to experience the residual samskaras which are left over and grow further. So stop blaming anybody for being born in a certain zodiac and that is why I am suffering. No, you yourself chose to be born in that zodiac so that you can experience and do away with all the negative impressions.
Thus, the gross consciousness of the soul, after experiencing either hell or heaven, associates with the next human form, takes another birth to experience and exhaust the residual opposite impressions of the last birth.
So, what I am today, as I said, is nothing but the mold of the residual opposite impressions which I had gathered in my last birth and which I am supposed to be experiencing now. Am I clear? Make myself clear? Very clear.
As has already been said, this next human form of the soul is nothing but the consolidated mold of the residual opposite impressions of the last form.
Simple.
It is in this manner that an apparently unending chain of births and deaths of human forms or beings continues to form and dwindle. This is the course of reincarnation in human forms of the soul after it has gained full gross consciousness through the whole series of evolution of the gross consciousness. Right from the unconscious state of the soul, comparable to the deep sleep state of
See,
man.
here it says, right from the unconscious state of the soul comparable to the deep sleep state of man. So,
Until it has gained full gross consciousness comparable to the wide open eyes of man in the awake state, while experiencing the gross world, the soul is one, indivisible, infinite, formless, and is eternally in the oversoul.
in the first chapter, we had done it, that, not first chapter, subsequently we did, that the Atma in reality is the Paramatma. There is no such thing as Atma. The Atma is an apparent illusion because of the existence of a bubble around the soul. The moment the bubble bursts, the soul's experiences is Aham Brahmasmi, I am God state, God realization, I am the ocean. And not I am a part of the ocean, but I am the ocean. Why? Because the ocean of God is not only infinite, which means there is no place where it is not infinite. Not only eternal, which means always was, is, and ever will remain. There was never a time when it was not, and there will never be a time when it will not be. That means it is not only infinite and eternal, but it is also indivisible, cannot be divided. So obviously, the so-called drops are nothing but the ocean, but it has an appearance of a drop because of the existence of the mind bubble, and the bubble keeps on changing. And once at the fag end of the journey on the final seventh plane, when the bubble bursts, the experience of that drop soul is I am the ocean, because ocean is indivisible. So here Baba says that, I'll read the last few lines, right from the unconscious state of the soul, comparable to the deep sleep state of man, until it has gained full gross consciousness, comparable to the wide open eyes of man in the awake state. Baba is only comparing. While experiencing the gross world, the soul is one, capital O, indivisible, infinite, formless, and is eternally in the oversoul. It cannot be out of the oversoul. The drop cannot be out of the ocean.
Throughout the whole process of evolution, reincarnation was an absolutely spontaneous outcome of the first urge manifested in the unconscious soul to become conscious of its eternal and infinite self.
The whole of this journey, we call it a journey from creation to evolution to reincarnation to involution to realization, is an apparent journey. There is no real journey. Apparent journey from unconscious divinity to conscious divinity. Divinity is given. Divinity is the platform. Divinity is by default. Everyone and everything is divine. Cannot but be divine, because everything has originated from the divinity of God. So it's a journey from unconscious divinity to the conscious divinity. It's a journey from an apparently separated drop from the ocean till it becomes one with the ocean and experiences I am the ocean. That's all what God speaks is all about.
As has been mentioned already, we can now understand that the cycle of evolution of consciousness of soul evolved further and greater consciousness together with the evolution of forms of higher and higher types, while exhausting the impressions of the dissociated forms of lower types.
So it's all a progress. The lower types in terms of forms, in terms of samskaras are dropped, and higher and higher and higher is taken till the most complex and complete form, which is that of a human being. So at the urge, the whim, the lahar, who am I? It wanted to know what is consciousness, and the will to be conscious actually fructified in the very first human form where the consciousness is complete. But as whatever you call it, unfortunately, or as the design is, in that very first human form, that very first human form was equipped to realize God in that very first birth of a human form. But it could not do it because the tendency from the very beginning, eons you can say, the tendency to associate with the form, the habit pattern of associating with the form continued. So even when in the first human form was taken, the identification was not with the self or the soul, but the identification was with the form. And because of that trick which Baba played, that we were identified with the form, and then it goes on and on and on. Because if in the very first human form, I am God would have come, then perhaps, God would have become unemployed. Because now the moment human beings come, everything is over, I am God state. But no, he has to play along 84 lakhs of reincarnation process, and so it goes on and on and on.
Thus, the evolution of consciousness of soul apparently causes the soul to identify itself with and gather varied innumerable impressions of higher and higher gross species of forms of the gross world.
So Baba is now, as we have said in the very first chapter, in the very first talk, that it tends to be repetitive. And in a way it's good that repetition reinforces remembrance, retention and reproduction, isn't it? When you keep on repeating, then it reinforces. You get so anchored. As Baba had said, I think to, who was that gentleman? Let God speak, sing in your vein. Robert Dreyfus. You read it as many times as you can, that it actually sings in your vein. So Baba tends to be, in a sense, repetitive.
The clean-cut and major concrete gross forms after the first 7 major, most abstract gaseous and fluid forms with which the consciousness of the soul associated with every leap of greater and greater consciousness are separated by the 7 leaps from stone to metal, from metal to vegetable, from vegetable to worm, from worm to fish, from fish to bird, from bird to animal, and lastly, from animal to human being.
We've done this.
The most finite first impression of the first urge gave to the unconscious soul the most finite first consciousness. Gradually, varied impressions gained greater finite consciousness for the soul, and eventually the evolution of consciousness was complete when the soul identified itself with the most first human form.
Needs no explanation. Yeah.
In human form, the soul achieves full and complete consciousness. Therefore, the soul, having now gained full and complete consciousness in human form, does not need any more or any other higher forms to evolve consciousness.
That means consciousness, evolution of consciousness comes to a halt in the very first human form.
Consciousness of gross.
Sorry?
Consciousness of gross.
No, consciousness not only of gross.
Of the bodies.
See, the point is, yes, in a sense, consciousness of gross only, because even though simultaneously the subtle and the mental are also evolving, there is no consciousness of the subtle and the mental. So at this stage of the first human form, the consciousness is only of the gross. It's only when all the gross impressions are loosened, they become feeble, they become fine, they become rarefied, and the gross conscious now transforms into subtle conscious, then they will enter the subtle plane, which is the first plane of consciousness, and then the consciousness would be subtle and not gross or not mental. Okay? Yeah.
This consciousness is full and complete. Though the soul has gained full and complete consciousness, it is still not at all conscious of itself as one, indivisible, eternal, and infinite, and does not experience infinite knowledge, power, and bliss. but it is only fully conscious of its identity with human form and its varied aspects and experiences the gross world in full.
It experiences the gross world in full. Why? Because the consciousness of that particular soul is predominantly gross. So, as is the consciousness, so is the experience. If the consciousness is subtle, the experience would be totally subtle, not gross and mental. If the consciousness is mental, there'll be no experience of gross and subtle. Yesterday we did that. In spite of the fact that they would be living in the gross world, they would be having a body, eating, drinking, sleeping, walking, talking, doing everything that a normal gross conscious human being does. But their consciousness is focused on the mental or subtle, respectively, as a result of which we see them doing a gross act, but their consciousness is focused on the subtle or mental.
The soul with full consciousness is still unconscious of its original infinite state because of the unwanted, though necessary, burden of the gross impressions of the human form from which the consciousness of the soul dissociates as that form drops dead. These impressions of the human form now dead still cling to the full consciousness gained, and as usual, the consciousness of the soul centralizes itself in these gross impressions of the human form just dropped.
I'll be repeating it many times that it's a repetition. I have to keep on repeating this, that when a particular soul has a form, the consciousness is focused on the form. The moment the form is dropped, the consciousness is not lost, but the consciousness is now focused on the impressions. And based on the impressions or samskaras, the consciousness will experience the state of heaven or hell. And as they are experiencing the state of heaven or hell, they are also simultaneously utilizing or enjoying those samskaras, and so they are becoming lighter and lighter. And as they are about to be balanced, it takes another form. And this keeps on repeating over and over again.
In trying to unburden consciousness of these impressions, the gross consciousness of the soul tends the soul to experience and exhaust these impressions through innumerable opposite experiences taken through a series of reincarnations. In this process of reincarnation, the consciousness of the soul, while trying to liberate itself from the burden of impressions, gets still further entangled at every stage of reincarnation.
This is what we just did. That the whole idea of the reincarnation process is to get rid of the samskaras. But instead of getting rid of the samskaras, because of the prabhav, we call it, the force of Maya, we get into illusion, and instead of eradicating the samskaras, we end up gathering more samskaras. That's what Baba is saying. The soul, while trying to liberate itself from the burden of impressions, gets still further entangled at every stage of reincarnation.
When a complete balance of experiences of opposite impressions is just about to be attained, it is just then disturbed by the consciousness of the soul associating itself with the next new human form.
Because once the samskaras are balanced quantitatively and qualitatively, which is an impossibility except by the grace of a perfect master or the avatar, who's the eternal living perfect master, we cannot balance the samskaras on our own. And that is why, perhaps, Baba says that when I decide to do something, it may be a spiritual exercise, like maybe yoga. If yoga is not actually spiritual because it's more of the asanas for the physical body, which is good, of course, or any path that I may adopt, the path of knowledge, the path of bhakti, the path of karma, whatever it means. But as long as the I is there,
Sorry.
I am doing it. As long as the I is there, I am actually accumulating more samskaras. I hope I am making sense. We think that, oh, I am doing this karma yoga or this yoga or that. I am a great meditator. I can meditate for 4 hours without any disturbance. I. The platform of ego I is there, it binds further. And just to make the whole thing a little light, I remember I was doing some course. They were deeply into meditation. I am not. I'm just being very open and frank, not at all, in fact. And they had gone to what we call as an outing or a workshop where we are supposed to meditate. So I said, let me go and see what it is. So we were supposed to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and then after a little what is it called? Ablution. You're supposed to sit and meditate. So I also went with them. So about 5 minutes. I asked first the leaders, how long does it take? It's about 4 o'clock. If you start by 7:30, we will end. I said, okay, let me try. After 15, 20 minutes, I was feeling very uncomfortable. So I looked around. Everybody's head, the eyes were very closed. And so I got up, went back to sleep, put the alarm for 7 o'clock, Again came at 7 o'clock and again said like this, And everybody was exchanging notes. What did you find? You saw some colors, you saw some this thing. And I said, see, this is my first time. So I did not see anything, I said, but it was good, I said. But so what I'm trying to convey, this is just actually it happened actually. What I'm trying to convey is my understanding of Baba's literature is simply this. The moment I come forth from the limited, finite, separative, egocentric I, then whatever I do, it binds. As simple as that. Calculation is very simple. And that is why Baba talks about, in discourses, Baba talks about constructing a provisional ego which is subservient to that of the master, and genuinely and sincerely feel and believe that it is not I who is doing it, it is Baba who is doing through me. And when that I is not there over a long period of time in whatever I may be doing, thinking, speaking, acting, then over a period of time that samskaras get reduced because there is no, in other words, the agency is not I, the agent of performing anything is other than the I, then it becomes easy to eradicate. And that is the reason why Baba gave a lot of importance to love. Real love. I'm not talking about infatuation or lust or devotion or love, real love, where there is no thought of I, where the thought is only of your beloved. And that is where gradually over a period of time, perhaps by Baba's grace and our little effort, that I gets reduced.
Absence of this association would otherwise have neutralized the effect of the impressions by an equal balance of respective opposite experiences, and would thus have liberated the consciousness of the soul from all impressions of opposites.
But that liberation never comes of our own accord. It has, according to me, my understanding is nobody has ever reached that state on their own accord. At the last fag end of the journey, which Baba calls at the peer level 6 to 7, there is a need for a living perfect master or the avatar who's the eternal living perfect master.
Here, the simile of a perfect balance would be appropriate. The consciousness gained by the soul during the process of evolution resembles the indicator at the fulcrum of a perfect balance, and the two pans of the balance are filled with the unequal weights of opposites of impressions such as virtue and vice,
I don't know
etc.
if people have seen, there are two pens and there are those three chains and there is a fulcrum, that fulcrum. We see that symbol in the court of law, like justice. So there are two pens, and Baba says that he's just giving an example, and in the two pens, there is on one pen there is a vice, there is a virtue.
Unequal
And the
weights.
fulcrum is the consciousness
Of unequal weights.
of unequal weight. Yes.
In this way, consciousness, acting like the indicator at the fulcrum, tries to gain equilibrium, which is impossible as long as there are in existence unequal impressions of opposites remaining to be experienced.
So the fulcrum will never be at a balance. It will be either this way or that way.
It is therefore that the gross consciousness of the soul constantly seeks to experience the predominant opposite impressions in order to gain a total equilibrium of the impressions of opposites.
When the soul is constantly seeking to experience the predominant opposite impressions, that means when you are experiencing the predominant opposite impressions, automatically they are being utilized, they are being spent, and you are trying to come to a balance.
But the tragedy is this, that as soon as the gross consciousness of the soul tends to reach the 0 point of equilibrium by gradually experiencing the predominant opposite impressions, it so happens that the consciousness of the soul invariably gets too engrossed in experiencing the predominant opposite impressions and experiences them or exhausts them to such a degree that these predominant opposite impressions are now reduced.
So
That
now
is,
this was predominant, I am utilizing, enjoying. It goes like this.
reduced, that is, through experience to such a level that those impressions which were overbalanced by the original predominant opposite impressions now become predominant, and a great disturbance of balance or equipoise occurs. Wherefore, consciousness, acting like the indicator at the fulcrum, swings or switches in just the opposite direction of its original experience.
So you can never come to a balance.
It is at this juncture that the consciousness of the soul turns towards the experience of the newly predominant opposite impressions.
Now
through-
these are newly predominant. For previously this was predominant, and I was so lean in enjoying that now this has become predominant. So now I have to take
Another human-
in order to experience this particular one.
through another human form. A human being takes form or birth as a medium to satisfy the demanding need of the consciousness of the soul, which now seeks to exhaust or spend or experience the more predominant opposite impressions. It is
And that is why, we are very quick at judging people. I started the session by that Baba's beautiful quote, there is no creature which is not destined for the supreme goal, as there is no river which is not winding its way to the sea. Winding its way. The mountain is here, the river is flowing, the ocean is here, the river is supposed to go like this, but instead of going in this direction, it is going somewhere, going zigzag, and then finally reaching the ocean. Now what is this zigzag, and why is it happening? Why is it that a person is not virtuous or good all the time? No, because he has utilized it. So now unless and until he either gets good from somebody or he does something so-called bad or vicious, it won't be balanced. So that is why we don't need to judge people who are, in a sense, going zigzag, because ultimately that is the pathway which that river has chosen in order to reach the goal. We do not know what are the samskaras of different persons. So that is the reason why Baba many times emphasized never to backbite, never to slander, never to judge another, because we do not know what samskaras they are holding and what is the impulsion. Yesterday we did impulsion and compulsion word. So that is impelling the soul to behave in a particular manner. Every person cannot but behave in that manner for the simple reason that is the mold of his impressions. And we are all slaves of our samskaras.
It is but natural that the predominant qualities manifested now by this human soul will be in accordance with the predominant opposite impressions, of which this new human form is but the mold.
That is why Baba says, that once you are born a king, then you are born a beggar. Once you are supposedly a very virtuous person and then a very vicious person, high, low, good, bad, healthy, sick, white, black, easterner, westerner. It is only through these opposites that we move forward. In one of the books, I don't remember which one, whether it was Beams or whatever, where Baba says, that there is a log of wood which is floating in the river, and there are two banks of the river. The log of wood will go and float at, let's say, virtue, and float for some time in the virtuous bank, and then it will come to the vice and float for some. So it will bang between the two banks. It will bang, B-A-N-G, between the two banks of the river, but in the process what is happening is it is flowing further. You cannot expect to be stuck at one particular bank.
Thus, in the process of reincarnation, the fully gross conscious human soul, fortified with fully developed subtle and mental bodies, though unconscious of these, must necessarily experience countless varied experiences of impressions of opposites, the impressions which are diametrically opposite in a chain of unending experiences.
That means every human being will have to experience the impressions of opposites, the impressions which are diametrically opposite in a chain of unending experience. Everybody has to go through all these experiences.
Through its association with the gross body, the soul seeks to exhaust its previously accumulated opposite impressions, but rarely succeeds in doing so. On the contrary, it often accumulates fresh impressions of opposites.
That we did. That we are here to get rid of the samskaras, but in the process we add up more.
When the gross form is about to exhaust the impressions which brought it into existence, it is dropped.
That also we did. When it is about to be, the moment all the impressions which it has brought, it drops. The body is dropped.
The residual opposite impressions lead the soul to heaven or hell in accordance with the predominance of virtue or vice. In discarnate existence also, all opposite impressions seek to be exhausted through the subjective experiencing of vivified impressions.
So that means here also, in the state of heaven or hell, we are experiencing these impressions subjectively, which means mentally. There is no physical body. And therefore Baba says that the body is like a buffer, it's like a cushion. So joys are also cushioned and sufferings are also cushioned. Now if we have done something bad, what we call as vicious, and when the body is dropped, the experience of suffering is increased manifold because this cushion is not there. And the same thing happens with joy. When you are in a state of heaven, all you need to think is, let's say, think about some beautiful sights and you get to enjoy that. Think about some beautiful music and you get to enjoy that. So there also it is manifold. So this body is like a cushion or a buffer for our experiences.
But even here, in the state of heaven or hell, the equipoise of impressionlessness is generally approximated but missed, and the residual predominant opposite impressions goad the consciousness of the soul to associate with a new gross medium.
Just as in the gross body, it is about to be balanced and you drop the body. In the same way, in the bodiless or discarnate experience in the heaven and hell, it is about, Baba uses the word, but even here, that means in the state of heaven or hell, in the state of heaven or hell, the equipoise of impressionlessness, we are supposed to be impressionless. The equipoise of impressionlessness is generally approximated. You just come closer and closer, but missed, always missed. And the residual predominant opposite impressions goad the consciousness, impels, pushes, goads the consciousness of the soul to associate with a new gross medium, new gross body.
Complete equipoise is lacking in death as well as in birth. It can only be achieved in the gross world. Therefore,
That, in other words, you can never experience liberation when you are not in the body. It can only be experienced in the gross world where you have a human body.
Therefore, an endless chain of lives in the gross sphere is sustained by residual impressions until consciousness succeeds in getting established in impressionless equipoise. At every stage and in every state of reincarnation, the consciousness of the fully human conscious soul gets firmly centralized in the more and more concentrated impressions of human forms with which it has identified and from which it has dissociated.
Firmly centralized, firmly focused. We have done this, again repeating. While in the body, the consciousness focuses on the body as I. While out of the body is dropped, the consciousness focuses on the impressions.
There seems to be no escape from these concentrated impressions. These impressions must be experienced and exhausted, and the more the impressions are experienced, the more the impressions become concentrated. There's an asterisk.
Yeah, there's an asterisk there. We'll read that and finish. The more the impressions are experienced, the more the impressions becomes concentrated. That means the more you experience anything, the more you are inviting impressions. So the way not to invite the impressions is to consciously create, as Baba says, a provisional ego. That means it is not I who is doing it. When the agent of action is not I, then whatever you may be experiencing, Baba said this, if you are eating thing, it is Baba eating, it is Baba brushing teeth, it is Baba, going to the loo, Baba having a bath, Baba having lunch. So when the focus is always Baba and Baba and Baba, then to a very great extent, further accumulation of impression is not there, because the agent of action is not I, but Baba. But it has to be done honestly. And if you very critically and meticulously read Baba's wish, the 6 points which Baba has given, he is, we are not going to discuss that, so I won't go deep into that. He is somehow, he's not saying thou shalt not do this, thou shalt, nothing of that sort. The centralized idea is to focus on Baba. If you really go through that, we won't go through that now. So the trick or the key of getting out of this rut is to keep Baba as our constant companion by remembering him and by offering everything to him. Now there's an asterisk, so we'll read that.
Knowing that creation is not an accident and it has a deeper meaning than is apparent to the eye, the seers of all ages have time and again drawn the attention of the world to the fact that although for a certain period of his life on this planet, man may identify himself exclusively with the life of the senses, his transcendental destiny is God realization. Maulana Rumi, in his Masnavi, has a parable that illustrates this. The cub of a tiger happened to be reared amongst a flock of sheep. As the cub grew up, it developed all the traits of the sheep and grazed and bleated like them, so that it never thought of itself as anything different from the sheep. One day, however, a tiger from the jungle approached one from the flock and said to him, "Do you know that you are a tiger like me and not one of the sheep?" Thereafter, he coaxed the strayed tiger to look at its image in a rivulet nearby and succeeded in enlightening it as to its true nature. The moral of this fable is that man also allows himself to be identified with the world of senses and seems to have no way of escape. But there is a way of escape, for eventually a master appears who enlightens him. He is then redeemed and finds himself in the course of time face to face with his ultimate goal, God realization.
So what this parable is trying to say is, like Baba always says, you and I are not we but one. So in other words, in one sense, we are all God, but we are so enmeshed in the world of senses. We are so much enamored by Maya, which is creating all this illusion in our life, that we consider ourselves only as man or woman, human beings. And the example here given is, we all, I think she read it, doesn't require much of explanation, that the tigress died and the cub was reared in a flock of sheep, and the cub identified itself as a sheep. Only one fine day, the real tiger comes and tells the tiger, the strayed tiger cub, that you are not a sheep, you are a tiger like me. Couldn't understand, how can it be? Then the tiger takes that baby cub to a rivulet and shows the image. See, you and I look alike. You are not like sheep, you see. And that is where the illumination takes place, and the cub realizes, oh, I am a tiger. So in the same way, when a master arrives in our life, Baba has arrived in our life, and he keeps harping on the same thing, that you may be experiencing yourself as a human being, but actually you are God. And all our focus should be to reach that state of Aham Brahmasmi, or God realization. I would say in this very life, because it's I keep repeating Ramakrishna Paramhamsa's very beautiful statement, which says, and I'll end with that. It says, he is to no purpose who, having the rare privilege of being born a man, does not realize God in this very life. In other words, to be born a man is such a, and when we say man, it means a human being, Only thing is, we need to really go within ourselves and try to find out, why am I here? What am I supposed to be doing? And whatever am I doing, is it propelling me closer to the truth or taking me away from the truth? And accordingly behave. And the shortcut which we discussed yesterday was Baba's last wish, that whosoever takes my name at the time of breathing his last comes to me. So our focus should be, since we are human beings, since we are so blessed to be in the orbit of the avatar himself, not just ordinary saint or sadhu or Mahayogi or Peer or Wali or Aulia, no, it's the avatar himself. We should make the maximum effort and take the maximum advantage of this situation and of this placement by remembering Baba in everything that we do, so that hopefully one fine day when we breathe our last, we are able to remember him and attain moksha or mukti, which is the goal, in a sense, one of the aspects of the goal of the whole creation. I think with that we end. I think, yes, we have taken 2 minutes more, but that's okay. Avatar Meher Baba ki jai. Thank you, Baba. Thanks a lot. Jai Baba.